Good morning. I'm Angela O'Sullivan and I'm Professor of Inclusive Practice in Teaching and Learning here at DMU. I think curiosity is something that has a very strong theme in my own education, both through personal experience and in the kind of resources that I've developed through my career. Curiosity basically means being eager to know something, and Einstein himself said, I'm neither clever nor especially gifted. I am only very, very curious. So the more curious we are, then the more knowledge that we gain, and then we can use that knowledge, hopefully, to our advantage. Now, I remember as a child being curious, particularly about creepy crawlies, which I know a lot of people don't like. I found a book called Caterpillar Capers in the reading shelf at my primary school. And what was interesting about this is that it was imaginative, but it wasn't about fairies or monsters or aliens. It was about a girl who had a doll's house and she took it out into the garden. And instead of playing with her dolls, she collected all these caterpillars and put them in the doll's house. And then she sort of forgot about it. And we know that they would have formed a chrysalis and then eventually they would become butterflies. But the way the story was written, it was as if you didn't know that was going to happen. And as a child reading that, I didn't actually know that was going to happen. So she went to the doll's house after a period of time. She lifted the roof on it, and all of these butterflies all emerged. And I found that to be something that was very, very interesting. I was thinking, how did that happen? What was the process? In other words, what was the process of metamorphosis? And that curiosity led me to want to do all sorts of different experiments in life and try and discover things, especially relating to insects. So one day I made an entomological discovery. I found this little thing creeping along on, I think it was on a rose bush, and I'd never seen it before. Because of my interest in insects, I'd got lots of books about insects, and I'd go through and check and see everything I found, try and work out what it was. But I knew straight away this wasn't in my book. So I put it in a jam jar and waited to see if I could find it, looking through all the different books that I'd got. But a few days later, when I went back to look at it, it did not look so well. It had shriveled up, it had dried up, it wasn't moving. And I felt really, really guilty that I had killed this lovely little thing that I was trying to identify. If it actually was a new species, to be honest, I'd been thinking about what I might name it. And it was very sad to me that that had happened. But then I didn't throw it away. And about a week or so later, I heard this scratching noise and I went to look at it. And out of that, what looked to be a dead, shriveled up body, emerged this almost white beetle. And I could see that it was a beetle, and I could see that it had discarded the outer shell, which was like a chrysalis. But I'd never seen a beetle like that before, and I knew it wasn't in my book. And I remember rushing to get my dad and getting him to look at it, and he'd never seen it either. And as we just were mesmerized by it, I was definitely thinking, I need to find a name. This is my beetle. This is a new beetle. But as we watched it, something happened. It started to get darker in its coloration, and two very distinct black dots started to emerge. And it was obvious that it was going to be a ladybird. I didn't know that's where ladybirds came from. I didn't know the ladybird life cycle. And what amazed me even more than that was that my dad, who I thought knew everything, because when you're a child, you think that adults know everything, he didn't know that either. So I was very, very surprised by the whole process. The thing that I found in the first place, the fact that it went into a chrysalis, and the fact that it went through this process, which I now know is pumping the colours into the different parts of the body, and then it dries out into this much darker coloration. What an amazing process. And it was this that initiated in me the curiosity about molecular biology. So when I think about it now, I just could not, in my child's mind, work out what had happened in that chrysalis stage. But now, what I see is that when I teach biochemistry, I can explain to people it's like the atoms are in one order, like the bottom left hand picture is representing our larvae. Then they all get broken down and reorganized in the chrysalis stage. And then in the right hand image, they get reorganized into the ladybird, but we've got some bits left over, and that's like the discarded chrysalis. So this curiosity about what happened, what this insect was, actually started my journey in understanding about chemistry, particularly biochemistry, and being able to envisage it like this. This is how I teach now, letting people understand the chemicals by making them into models, handling them. So I think curiosity itself is the center of learning. It is, as William Ward said, it's the wick in the candle of learning. And it is our job as educators not only to ignite it, but also to keep that flame burning, because curiosity is what makes us have that motivation to go on and learn. So we've seen that curiosity enables us to recognize things around us and maybe recognize the potential for ideas, but creativity is what makes those ideas into reality and brings the ideas to life. Now, a child's mind is very curious and creative, and we need to nurture this approach into lifelong learning so that we don't lose that enthusiasm and that engagement. So how do we nurture that creativity? As a child, I was very curious, and I always wanted to put my ideas into reality, perhaps a little too immediately. But how can we see the world through the eyes of a child? How can we understand what they're thinking and what they're prioritizing? Well, in 1969, I started writing a diary. It's not a very big diary, and it only has a couple of sentences for each day. But at least it allows me to go back in time and see what I was thinking, what I was prioritizing in my thoughts at that time. "1969 was the moon landing. So I thought to myself, why don't I go back and see what was my perspective on that? What could I possibly have written on the day that Apollo 11 landed on the moon? Today, Dad went swimming. Also, Apollo 11 landed on the moon." So I found that quite interesting, that it was a bit of an add-on, something which even in my memory, I think back and think, oh, I do remember that happening, was not something, was the first thing that I wrote in my diary. And so then I thought, I wonder what happened on the day they came back, which we now know as splashdown. So surely I must have been excited. I remember it happening. I can remember waiting to see those images on the television. Today I got Judy, which was a comic, and also went to Lutterworth. What had happened to Apollo 11? And I was a little bit disappointed, because I would have thought that that would have been high priority, at least something that I would have at least mentioned. So it's interesting that a child's perspective can be very different, because for me, Apollo 11 landing on the moon was not necessarily something that was unusual, because for a lot of my life, those kind of plans had been happening. It almost seemed like that was business as usual. But then I noticed in my notes, 24th of July, splashdown. And I've written it in capitals. It's the only thing in capitals in the whole diary. So actually, even though it might have been a bit of an afterthought, it did have a big impact on me. And I think sometimes that's what we need to see, is that looking at things from a child's perspective, they might not be seeing what an adult sees as being very exciting and inspiring. They might not see that at that time in the same light. And I think that's really important when we consider nurturing creativity. But one memory I do have of this time is that week I was very excited by Apollo 11 and the moon landing. And I remember saying to my dad, will we ever walk on the moon, do you think? There's me taking my knowledge and trying to make it creatively into reality. And he gave me a sort of knowing look and he said, no, I don't think so. And in a way, I think without realizing, he was snuffing out that creativity because he was living much more in the real world than I was potentially as a child. And on reflection, it's made me realize when people ask those kind of things, don't just say, I don't think so. If it's not impossible, then it's possible. So encourage people to think creatively. And as I've become more confident with my creativity, that's helped me, I think, through my teaching and my learning. So how do we rekindle that creativity? Well, one of the projects that I was involved with was something called the Museums and University Partnership Initiative. And I teamed up with Montfort Manor, which is where Sir Isaac Newton was born. And in the garden, there was his apple tree. And for a moment, I thought, no, I'm not going to ask this because maybe this is taking my ideas to reality a little bit too far. Then I thought, no, I'm going to ask. So I asked, I wonder, possibly, could we have a cutting for De Montfort University? And yes, of course we could. So we worked on a project with students. We got the cutting and it's a nice, happy little apple tree. It's a symbol of creativity to me. It's a symbol of asking people, can you take my ideas a bit further, please? And when they do, then that creativity goes on to blossom. So similarly, there's other projects that I've been involved with, often collaboratively, where I have taken ideas or other people's ideas and helped to nurture them. And probably the most well-known of those at De Montfort University is Crashhead. Crashhead actually started as a project where a group of teacher fellows were looking at setting up a crashed scene which could be used as a teaching tool. So this was in collaboration with different subjects, maths, physics, criminology, forensic science. And we also got the artistic makeup and special effects students from Leicester College involved. We wanted it to be real because creativity is about realism. It is about learning through something that's real. But a group of us came together and came up with the idea, yeah, let's do this. Let's get a crashed car. But then it came to a bit of a full stop because where are we going to get one of those from? But I contacted the police, and the police officer there in the picture was so supportive. And he also very much believes in teaching through realism. And so he crashed a car for us. That is one of the crashed cars. We've had another one since then. And he also helped us to understand the maths and the physics and the forensics behind that. And this project then became quite a broad project. It became an outreach activity, and it also became a teaching module, which was very successful. And we applied for academic innovation project funding, and we got the money to be able to get a very realistic mannequin because we had a really realistic car, but not a very realistic mannequin. But the mannequin then enabled us to be able to take this to another level of realism. And the video that will follow shows that. So creativity leads to success. Crash Ed was very, very successful, and you can see some of the Kate team there. We went up to Edinburgh, we got the Collaborative Award for Teaching Excellence and an additional award, a Spotlight Award, because we had created such breadth in the collaborative initiative that we had developed. So since then, the Crash Ed team has gone on to do all sorts of other things. This creativity is contagious. For once, it's something that is something positive to pass on. People who are awarded Vice Chancellor's Distinguished Teaching Awards, Teacher Fellows, National Teacher Fellows, Kate Awards, these are the creative people that we need to work with, nurture, and allow that creativity to spread and rekindle other people's childhood's creativity. Academic innovation projects are a really good way of getting funding for such things, as are Kai sabbaticals. And here are 3 members of the Kate team who also worked on a project called Puzzle Ed. So Puzzle Ed, the funding from that paid for all sorts of things that you can see there, like safes and padlocks and treasure chests, all sorts of different ways of being able to learn. And this creativity is, in my opinion, the way forward. We need to rekindle that creativity. We need to get everybody to work together so that we disrupt what is the very mundane ways that people in the past formerly taught. And we need to be very, very creative, very curious, and work together towards success.